The setting sun bathed the dusty streets of Sahuayo in a golden light that seemed to linger longer than usual, as if nature itself was waiting for something extraordinary to happen. Young José Sánchez del Río, no more than 14 years old, hurried along the narrow road, his sandals kicking up small clouds of dust with every determined step. His heart raced, not out of fear, but out of a fire burning within him, a fire to defend his faith, his family, and above all, his King, Cristo Rey, Christ the King. For months now, the news had spread through the small town. Churches were being closed, priests were being arrested, and anyone daring to speak openly about their Catholic faith was met with brutal punishment. The Mexican government, under the banner of secularism, was determined to eradicate the influence of the church, and the Cristeros Catholic rebels had risen up in defiance, fighting to protect their religious freedom. José had heard the stories from his older brothers and their friends. But what struck him most was not the tales of battles or victories. It was the stories of priests being taken from their parishes, of families being told they could no longer openly worship, and of children like him being forced to grow up in a land where faith was treated like a crime. It was more than José could bear. As he reached the door of his family's humble home, he flung it open and burst inside, his young face flushed with urgency. His mother, a simple woman with gentle eyes and hands weathered from years of hard work, looked up from the table where she was peeling potatoes. "José," she said softly, though there was an edge of worry in her voice, "where have you been?" José stood tall, his eyes wide and intense. "Madre, I've decided. I want to join the Cristeros." The potato she had been peeling slipped from her grasp, falling onto the floor with a soft thud. For a long moment, silence filled the room, save for the faint sound of distant church bells tolling in the evening air. "You're too young," she said finally, her voice low, almost a whisper. But her words were not a question. They were an attempt to grasp the impossible. She had known for some time that this day might come. She had seen it in the way José prayed at night, kneeling longer and with more fervor than his siblings. She had seen it in the way his face lit up whenever the name of Cristo Rey was spoken. But knowing this didn't make it any easier. José took a step toward her, his voice steady and resolute. "Madre, they've taken Father Rodrigo. They've taken him and they're killing priests. They're burning our churches. They won't stop until they've silenced all of us, until Cristo Rey is forgotten." She stood slowly, her hands trembling, and walked over to her son. She cupped his face in her hands, looking deeply into his eyes, as if trying to find some trace of the little boy who used to run through the fields, playing without a care in the world. But what she saw instead was something far stronger than she had ever imagined. The heart of a warrior. "I know, José, I know." Her voice cracked as tears welled in her eyes. "But you are my son. You are not ready to die." José's voice softened, but his resolve did not waver. "I am ready, and if they kill me, I will die for Christ." At the break of dawn, with the mist still clinging to the fields, José arrived at the Cristeros' camp. The camp was alive with activity men sharpening their weapons, tending to their wounds, and whispering prayers in the early light. The smell of sweat and smoke hung in the air, and the tension was palpable. But José felt no fear. For him, this was a sacred mission, one he had prepared for not with weapons, but with prayer and devotion. As he approached the camp's center, a tall figure emerged from a tent. It was General Enrique Gorostieta, the Cristero leader, a seasoned soldier who had once fought for the government, but had now become the commander of this unlikely army of farmers, laborers, and priests. His eyes, sharp and calculating, fell on the young boy standing before him. "You're too young to fight," the general said bluntly, not unkindly, but as a matter of fact. "This is no place for children." José didn't flinch. "I may be too young to fight," he replied, "but I am not too young to die for Cristo Rey." Gorostieta studied the boy for a moment, and in those few seconds, he saw something rare, something that made him hesitate. This was no ordinary child. There was a fire in José's eyes, a fire that could not be quenched by fear or by reason. Gorostieta, though hardened by years of war, was moved. "You want to fight then? For Christ?" he asked, his voice gruff. "Yes, General," José said firmly. The general nodded slowly. "Very well. But you will not fight with a weapon. You will be my flag bearer. You will carry the banner of Christ the King into battle. No guns, no knives, just the flag." A grin spread across José's face, not out of excitement, but out of a deep sense of purpose. He had no need for a gun. The banner of Cristo Rey was more powerful than any weapon. As the months passed, the Cristeros waged their guerrilla war against the Mexican army. José, true to his word, carried the flag of Christ the King with pride and devotion, becoming a symbol of hope and resilience to the men who fought beside him. They came to admire his bravery, his refusal to let fear take hold of him, and his unwavering faith. But war, as José soon learned, was not without its horrors. He saw men fall in battle, their lives snuffed out in an instant. He heard the cries of the wounded, the sobs of mothers and children who had lost everything. Each time he witnessed the brutality of war, he clutched the flag tighter, praying not for an end to his suffering, but for the strength to endure it. Every night, as the men lay down to sleep, José would kneel beside his bedroll, his rosary in hand, whispering prayers for the souls of the fallen and for the victory of Christ the King. His devotion became infectious, and the men began to see him not just as a boy, but as a spiritual leader among them, a beacon of hope in the midst of despair. And then, one fateful day, everything changed. The Cristeros had been ambushed. Outnumbered and outgunned, they fought valiantly, but the tide of battle was turning against them. José, standing on a small hill with the flag raised high, watched in horror as his friend, a fellow Cristero, was struck down by enemy fire. Without thinking, José rushed to his side, kneeling beside his fallen comrade. "I'll take your place," José whispered through tears, grabbing his friend's rifle and rising to his feet. For the first time, José fired a weapon. He fought not for glory, not for revenge, but for the love of Christ and his fellow soldiers. The battle raged on, and José fought with a fury that belied his young age. But it wasn't long before the enemy overwhelmed them. José, out of ammunition and surrounded, was captured. They dragged him to a small, dark cell, where the only light came from a tiny barred window high above. The soldiers mocked him, jeering at his youth and his faith. "You fought for a dead king," they sneered. "What did it get you, boy?" But José was not afraid. "Cristo Rey is alive," he replied, his voice calm, "and I would gladly die for him." The days in the cell stretched on, and each day the soldiers tried to break him. They offered him freedom, promised him his life if only he would renounce his faith. But every time, José gave the same answer: Viva Cristo Rey. His refusal enraged the soldiers, and they decided that if they couldn't break his spirit, they would break his body. They bound his wrists and ankles, dragged him through the streets of his hometown, whipping him as they went. José's feet were bloodied, his body bruised and broken, but with every lash he whispered, Viva Cristo Rey. As the sun began to set, the soldiers led him to a shallow grave they had dug outside the town. The cool evening breeze did nothing to soothe the pain coursing through his body, but José's heart was at peace. He knew what was coming, and he was ready. They offered him one last chance. "Renounce Cristo Rey," they said, "and you will live." But José only smiled through his pain. "You may kill me," he said softly, "but I will die for Christ." With that, they plunged a bayonet into his body. José gasped in pain but did not falter. "Viva Cristo Rey," he cried. Another stab. "Viva Cristo Rey," he repeated, though his voice was weakening. The soldiers, frustrated by his defiance, delivered the final blow, a gunshot to the head. His body crumpled to the ground, lifeless, but his spirit soared toward the king he had so faithfully served. Today, the story of Saint José Sánchez del Río is not just the story of a martyr. It is the story of a boy who knew that true courage comes from standing firm in one's faith, even in the face of death. His sacrifice continues to inspire people around the world to live boldly for Christ.